And now, it's time for your Low Country Real Estate Market Update.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Beatty. And gosh, 13 years I've been on this program helping people better understand the real estate market, the process of buying, selling, investing, managing, financing real estate, developing real estate, and, of course, market updates, helping you guys stay up to date with what's happening in the world of housing here in the Low Country since we've had so much change over the past several years. And this episode in particular, probably my favorite episode of the year. This is our Halloween episode. So these are spooky stories or you know, when things don't go according to plan in real estate, how do you handle it, right? So this show in particular is going to be a show about problem prevention and problem solving, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings and things happen that you just can't control or anticipate. But I think the really effective agents that have a lot of experience under their belt, I've done 1,500 transactions, so there's not much that stumps me these days. But I think the really experienced agents are the ones that can essentially use that experience to guarantee that they know how to solve the problem, or that they have the resources to solve the problem, or better yet, they can prepare you for what's about to happen to prevent that problem from happening in the first place. And so I do want to just say really quickly before we get into this, that if you guys have any questions, or, you know, if you want to kind of get it right the first time and hire a good agent that's going to, you know, take care of you in your best interest, we'd love the opportunity to interview for your business. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. So without any further ado, I have a very special guest today. Lynda Futch in my office on my real estate team is here today because she is the one behind the scenes fighting claw, tooth, and nail for our clients to make sure that they have the smoothest transaction possible. So, Lynda Futch, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right, so I guess tell us first a little bit about yourself, just so they know your background and who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I've been with the team 3 years, just a little bit over. I started in real estate in the early 2000s. I've kind of been in and out of the real estate world for the last long time. And I was born in Memphis. We moved here to Charleston, to the Isle of Palms, when I was 13. And I went to North Carolina when I was 15, went to Appalachian State, and then came back to Charleston in 2000 to finish my degree at the College of Charleston.
Right on. And so now you've been on the team for a little over 3 years. You've seen hundreds of transactions in that period of time. And so really, again, what we're talking about today is kind of just we all want to talk about the good stuff, right? Anytime you see an agent on Facebook, it's always like double bicep emoji. Look how awesome we are. Just sold another home in a day for full asking or whatever. You know, it's like they only want to see. They'll show you what they want you to see, right? They don't like revealing the tough times, the transactions that don't go according to plan, the sellers that sometimes put their homes on the market and they're frankly perfectly priced. There's nothing really wrong with the house, and it just, for whatever reason, takes longer than normal to sell, right? That's why we work off averages, and sometimes it's below, sometimes it's above. But so I want to get into some specifics, right? I want to tell some stories and the associated takeaways and lessons learned. So the first one we're going to talk about, because we're not going to give away addresses or clients, obviously, is we'll call this one Lisa. Okay. So Lisa is a property that originally was referred to me to possibly purchase as an investment opportunity. And I decided to pass on it. I couldn't purchase the property at a price that made sense for me to turn it into an investment property. The house needed everything, right? It needed a full renovation. And we're talking roof, mechanicals, all the cosmetics, little bit of structural. It was a lot, and I couldn't make the deal work. As we like to say on the show, it didn't pencil, right? So I refer it to somebody else. They end up buying it and improve it, right? They go through this massive renovation. It's an investor of ours that we've worked with multiple times, helped them sell properties, flip homes. And so here's where the story gets kind of interesting. We list the property for sale, right? And and I believe we put it under contract, and then find out while we're under contract with this buyer that the contractor the purchaser hired to renovate his house didn't pull any permits. And we're talking a full renovation. Absolutely, you needed permits, right? And so it just created this huge snowball effect where it was delay after delay, fix after fix after fix. And so, Lynda, let me stop talking and let me just kind of get your sense on it and kind of the story as it unfolded from your perspective.
Well, I think it was kind of the perfect storm of not thinking you've hired someone amazing to do all these things and everything was laid out. And then you come to find out it started with one deck, that back tiny deck that the city put a note on the door, no permit was pulled. And then as the city got involved and the county, everything just snowballed from there. And that's when the investor, who's very savvy, realized his contractor that he's trusted did not do what they said they were going to do, number one, but what they charged him $8,000 of the budget to do.
Right. And so it's just one of those unfortunate situations where, it wasn't our contractor. It wasn't our, responsibility to ensure that as he was renovating the property, his contractor was pulling permits. But certainly a lesson learned from that investor. And that's, for a lot of folks that are listening, you're going to have folks that need to do stuff to your house. You're going to have to hire contractors at some point, unless you can do it yourself. Certainly the major stuff you probably want to hire out. But I think it's really important to interview the contractor very thoroughly. You and I are going through this right now with your own house that you're going to be renovating, and just ensuring that quote and the way that it's laid out and the language within it all makes sense. Like perfect example, just kind of, sidebar here for a second, but like when you see quotes from contractors and they say install, fill in the blank. Maybe it's install toilets. You're getting all new toilets. Mm-hmm. So it'll say install toilets and it's $250 a toilet. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, it's a pretty good price. What it doesn't say, but what you need to clarify is who's providing the new toilet.
Yeah.
Is it provide and install, or is it just install? Now we're looking at $250 just to install a toilet that I had to go and buy for another $250 at least. We're at $500 a toilet. Doesn't really make much sense.
Right.
But those are the kind of situations where people get into, I think, real trouble. And that's why in this guide that I wrote, I've got multiple pages of it, really a full section almost dedicated to that part of the process, getting your property ready for sale, maintaining your home, hiring a contractor. And in this particular instance, Lisa, this property that we're calling it, roundabout, how much do you think that ended up costing that seller?
Thousands upon thousands.
Or,
to the point,
tens of thousands.
Yes.
Yeah.
To the point where it's sickening to think about.
Yeah.
And awful.
And so you trust but verify. Mm-hmm. It's great to have a trusting professional relationship with anybody you do business with, but you still have to cross your T's and dot your I's, because at the end of the day, it's your property, it's your money, it's your liability.
Right.
So you have to be careful with stuff like that. Which brings me to another one, kind of a similar situation, a little different. I'd say just similar in the fact that a lot of work needed to be done to the house. We sold a house a little while ago, a little more than a little while ago, and the structure of the home, right, the foundation, the joists, were an issue. And when you walked across the flooring, it had this spongy effect, right? And so we had, frankly, dozens of showings where folks were saying, there's something going on with the flooring. We had the owner saying, no, there's not. It's just the type of flooring that we have.
Right.
Couldn't get really either side to agree. And finally, after, I think quite a while of us pressing the issue, we finally got him to agree to have a contractor come out and take a look at the underneath of the house. And that's when, it's just like, look, I can, I've looked at so much real estate, I can tell you what things are wrong with the house and basically how much it's going to cost to fix it. Mm-hmm. it's just what I've done for the past 20 years, whether it's for clients or with my own money and in the investments that I do. But we finally got the seller to agree to have the contractor come by the house. And it was just like, yeah, we've got tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage throughout this house that we need to account for in our pricing strategy. Otherwise, we're just going to keep letting people through the door. They're going to keep saying no, and we're not going to gain any ground. In fact, we're probably losing ground because the longer we stay on the market, the less it's going to likely sell for.
Right. And
so I'd love your perspective on that particular property. I think you know which one I'm talking about. And I think maybe what some of the lessons are, the takeaways are for folks that might be listening.
I think that one was interesting because the seller was so great and kind of in a bind because he had a house up north that he was moving back to. So we just kind of wanted to get it done for him. And then once all of the feedback started coming back, we realized, whoa, there's a major problem because it was the same thing every time. And so I think with that one, I do a lot without you. But that one I had to call you in because he wanted to hear from you. He didn't want to hear from me. He wanted to hear from you that we need to have a contractor come in, look at everything, and then adjust the price accordingly. And sometimes it does take you because you're the man. You know what you're doing. And so he trusted you enough to let us arrange that for him. And then it opened his eyes to see, okay, here's really what's going on. And he didn't really want to fix anything. So the price did need to be adjusted to where we could get it sold. And once that happened, that was like a switch flipped and we were able to get it sold.
Right. Now, and he didn't, in this particular situation, they didn't have the money to fix it. Right. So it had to be accounted for in our pricing strategy, in our negotiation strategy. And I think that even in those instances, it's just because you don't have the money to fix your house doesn't mean you have to lose the battle, so to speak, when it comes to negotiations. Like perfect, right. We're going to take a break because we need to, but I want to talk about things like whether it makes sense to replace a roof or not.
Right.
Or whether it makes sense to go ahead and replace your flooring or not. Because that's a very common question we get. And then we'll get to some more horror stories because we've got more to share than I think probably we want to be able to share. But, we've got some good stuff for you coming up. So stick around. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. And remember, if you want to reach out to me, you have questions about the real estate market, you're thinking of hiring a real estate agent, maybe you're looking into investing in real estate, or you have investment properties you'd like for us to manage for you, then my number, 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. In the studio with Lynda Futch. She is my listing manager and closing coordinator. She is the person behind the scenes that makes it happen to make sure that you guys have a smooth and successful closing. But sometimes even the best needs some help and things don't go according to plan, or you're working with people on the other side of the transaction that are just in no way, shape, or form controllable, compliant, bunch of other C words probably, who knows? But, it's a challenge at times, right? And real estate is such an emotional process, such an emotional thing that people go through. And like I say on this program, not every reason to sell a house is a happy reason, right? And so we deal with all kinds of different situations and walks of life. And, we sell anything from, that first-time home buyer condo to multi-million-dollar properties, everything in between. We sell land all over the state, and we manage properties here in Charleston. And we help investors. I invest as well. So kind of spread pretty far across all facets of real estate. And I want to maybe talk for just a moment, Lynda, about property management. Because, you have rentals. I have a rental. Agents on the team, we train them on how to invest in real estate. They have rentals. Anything in particular that kind of comes to mind from a property management perspective that you think folks should know, maybe tied to a story, a horror story, keeping with the theme?
Well, at first, when we have our rental, we weren't sure. My husband and I were kind of like, yeah, we can do it ourselves. But after having a short-term rental in the mountains, we realized we can't do this ourselves. So it was just the time that Beatty Management was getting started. So it really solved our problem because busy people don't have time to manage it themselves. So I think if you're on the fence about hiring a property manager, do it. I mean, John has made our lives so easy. The process is so simple. He's there, he's checking, he's quarterly. He'll check with on our house to make sure that it's staying nice and the tenants are happy. So he's just invaluable to us as homeowners and landlords now. It's great that he does the quarterly inspections because we do have some properties that people get dogs and they paid for one dog, but recently he went to one that maybe had 2 more than they were supposed to. Mm-hmm. So he kind of alerted the homeowner to that and was able to collect the pet fees because dogs, bless their hearts, they do damage.
Right.
So he's just a huge asset if you're going to go into the investment property long-term rental game.
Yeah. I think because we also sell a ton of property that people maybe owned and then moved out of state. They turned it into a rental, stuck a tenant in there. And then by the time we get we get the opportunity even to walk through it because now the seller wants to sell it, the place is trashed. And they have no idea because they're self-managing and no one's checking on the property for them. And the tenant's certainly not going to let them know.
Right.
So yeah, just that one part of the service that we offer, I think is important. And then maybe just tied to the horror stories of the theme of the show, that there have been multiple times over the years where we've looked at a property and we're assessing it as a rental, right? Would this make a good rental property? Let's look at the income. Let's really dig deep into the numbers because in real estate, the saying goes, you make your money in real estate when you buy it, not when you sell it, because you can control how much you pay for it. Can't necessarily control how much you can convince a buyer to pay for your property, right? So we're going through the numbers and we start looking at the rental income and then we dig into kind of the line item sheet that's provided by the property management company, but all the charges that they had, because it wasn't making sense. They're renting it for this gross amount annually, but the net income was like way off. And so you start digging into these numbers and realizing that the property management companies are basically adding fees on top of contractor fees to coordinate and manage repairs to a property when, in my opinion, that's our job in the first place, is to maintain your investment and to increase and as best we can maximize your cash flow. I mean, that's what a good property manager does. But some of these properties and property management companies add in all of these surcharges, or they have their own contractor on staff, and they kind of determine and dictate what that pricing is, and they still take fees on top of it. So for anybody that's got a rental property, be wary of that because it can really chew into your cash flow. Maybe not so much a horror story, but for some, when they look at their statement at the end of the year and they wonder where all their money went, that's not a great thing. What else? I know that you've got plenty of stories. I'm going to stop talking a little bit and let you take the wheel.
So we've had an interesting 3 years. We've run into some things that you and I have never seen before, which is always a learning experience. I mean, we have put them in the book of, wow, I can't believe that happened. We had this amazing house downtown and a seller who was just so lovely and easy to work with. We got it under contract. It was a great price. This was an investor from out of state, and we verified that funds were there to buy the property. But we came to the closing day, and the funds weren't available. They were coming through a trust manager in New York, and it was very complicated. And so first Friday didn't close. We signed an extension, which is normal, happens every day. There's an extension on something for some reason. And this was a financing and contingency. So then the next Friday comes and there's another extension that's needed. That's when you start making the phone calls. Brian calls the guy in charge of the money. It's coming from overseas. So, okay, it was legit, but it was coming from overseas. And then the next Friday comes and there's another extension that's needed. Well, it turns out there's a squabble between the siblings, and one of the siblings is reluctant to release those funds. So the trust manager can't release them. They can't come over from whatever country they're coming from. But this goes on for 18 Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point,
Every day on Friday for like a half a year, I was just in a bad mood.
it was 18 months.
Yeah, you're right.
It was like, I mean, we didn't do it. Sometimes we did longer extensions because we knew it was going to, but it was literally 18 months of our Fridays.
Yeah,
that we were.
And it was one of those things too where, God, can we maybe address this on like a Thursday afternoon?
Yes.
Maybe even a Friday morning. I'd prefer not to have to hang by my phone at like 4:30 on a
Yes.
Friday and then rush to get an extension signed every week for a year and a half.
It was impressive.
Yeah, it was frustrating to say the least.
Yes.
But there's a silver lining to this story because, and this is, I think, you hear that a property goes under contract and stays under contract for a year and a half, and you're like, what in the world would cause that seller to agree to be under contract with a buyer for a year and a half?
Mm-hmm.
You know what the answer is? Extension fees.
Yes.
And we got a whole bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
What did we get, like $80,000 in extension fees?
Yes.
Yep. On top of the fact that after 18 months or so, buyer didn't buy the property.
Right.
We kept marketing it, and we had someone else come in and pay us what we wanted. We kicked the other buyer out, pocketed the extension fees, and then sold it to somebody else. And I think we were under contract and closed in like 3 weeks.
Yep.
Cash, boom, done.
Easy. Done.
Easy. So holding people accountable to the deadlines in the contract, I think, is the takeaway with that one. Because, far too often we see people on the other side of the equation. Like if we're representing the seller in a listing, the buyer will take their sweet time getting documents to the lender so that they can get those documents to underwriting and processing and do all the stuff they need to do to get a mortgage. Or we'll see people that, like let's say they've got 15 days to do their inspections, and they do their inspection on day 14 and then send us the inspection report and a repair request at 4 p.m. on the day that it's supposed to end. Mm-hmm. And it's just the timing is horrible on some of these things, but you do the best you can. But we have so many of these stories of lessons learned, but it seems like anytime you give somebody an inch, they take a mile.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to be friendly, but don't be their friend. Mm-hmm. You're not here to make friends. This is a business transaction. And sometimes I probably get labeled as a little too cold in the transaction, but people need me to be level-headed rather than get emotional with them. Because if I get emotional with them, more often than not, it doesn't work well.
Right. Every
Every time I kind of come in hot unnecessarily, I end up regretting it because I feel like I should have more composure than that. Sometimes my redheaded temper just gets the best of me. It is what it is, but very, very seldom.
You don't do that very often.
I mean,
at
I
all.
can count on one hand in 20 years the times that I have like literally raised my voice because I was so upset, but that's it. And certainly never at a client. Mm-mm. But let's keep talking about some of these examples because I think there's so many other lessons learned. In this particular example, this story, the lesson learned is hold the person accountable to the deadlines in the contract. In other words, there's no free lunch, right? You said that this is what you were going to do, and you didn't do it.
Right.
So if you're going to take more of my time and delay my plans, or potentially, or in very real instances, cost me money because of your delay, that's not acceptable.
Yep.
So having an agent that's going to go to bat for you and remove themselves from the commission. I'm not going to say remove ourselves from the outcome because we want the outcome. We want you to close on your property, but not at your disadvantage.
Right.
Right. Not to your peril in any way, shape, or form. So anyways, we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep going through some of these stories. Again, if you want to reach out to us, you want to hire us as your agent, interview us. Maybe you just want a copy of the guide that I wrote that I talk about on this show every once in a while. The most comprehensive home seller guide in Charleston. If you guys want a copy of that, text the word guide to 843-800-0065. Text the word guide or call or text me at 843-800-0065. And check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. And don't forget that we're on YouTube and Spotify and Google Play and iTunes, whether you want to watch video or listen to a podcast. you'll find us. I like to take a moment every show and just say that I appreciate those of you that listen to it, that rely on the information within it to help shape your understanding of the real estate market, the trends within it, and the process of buying, selling, and investing in real estate. There's a lot of money to be won or lost in these transactions, and I think it's really important that you self-educate, and I think part of that education is, if you feel you need it, hiring the right real estate agent. And so there's a lot to be said, I think, for the interview process and how you go about it. If you want to get your hands on some questions to ask an agent, or just some things that you should be thinking about in determining who's going to be the right person to help represent me throughout this next transaction, then I would say get a copy of our guide, the most comprehensive real estate guide in Charleston for home sellers, by texting the word guide to 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. You can also just call or text me. It goes straight to me. Or you can check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. So, continuing our discussion with Lynda Futch, who sits right next to me in the office every day. And she is the person that really processes the listings, the closings. She's the one that, quarterbacks the deal between the closing attorney and the lender and the inspector and the appraiser and contractors and termite inspectors and everybody else involved to make sure that ultimately our clients know what's going to happen before it happens, what to expect, and the deadlines associated with the buyer or the seller that we're representing along the way, right? Important dates, important milestones. So we've got some more examples. I know we've got plenty. Anything come to mind?
So our most recent deadline issue came with a house that we were working on. We represented, and this was interesting because we represented both sides. We had an agent on the team represent the buyer, and then you were representing the seller. So I was smack dab in the middle. And part of my job is to hold both sides accountable, especially when it's a buyer, to the deadlines that are in that contract, because it's, you're signing a legal document. Those deadlines have to be met or they have to be extended. So that's part of my process and what I look out for. So,
or you get into default.
Yes, which you don't want to be in default ever. But in that particular case, the buyers offered a certain amount of earnest money. I think it was $50,000, and $10,000 was going to be paid at the time that they signed and submitted the contract, which they did, and then another $40,000 was coming, a little later. 6 days later.
Yeah,
and so that 6 days came and went. I'm starting to ask questions. Does the attorney have the earnest money? Because we don't hold earnest money. So does the attorney have the earnest money? Can I have that receipt? No, we don't have it. So I start asking the buyer, and his funds were kind of tied up and he wasn't able to submit it at that point. So, we can extend that deadline, no problem. So then those deadlines get extended. Those deadlines are not met again. So then we start really asking questions. And this was interesting because Brian doesn't really talk to the buyer when he's not representing the buyer. So he can't.
Yeah, I only talk to my client.
Yeah. So I can talk to him, but I can only tell him so much because it was just a really interesting situation for me to be in.
Handled extremely professionally, by the way, because, and here's the challenge, right? You have one real estate office representing both parties to a transaction, and one person that is caught right in the middle in managing the transaction for both sides. Mm-hmm. So you have information likely that, if told to me, would give me an unfair advantage over the other agent on my own team and their client.
Right.
Which is why it's incredibly important when you're interviewing an agent, maybe to ask questions about how is dual agency handled, or what if another agent on your team is representing the buyer and you're still representing me? How does that work? I will just tell you really quickly in the past that we've had more people involved in the transaction than I personally like. We had an inside sales agent, we had a buyer agent, a junior agent, a showing agent, a transaction agent, a closing coordinator, a customer service rep. It's just like they start talking to so many people and they're like, does anybody really know what's going on over there? Or so anyways, sorry for a sidebar, but the details that you receive in those types of situations sometimes can't be shared with me. And so I just wanted to say, before we get any further on in the story, that you did an impeccable job of maintaining integrity.
Thanks. I tried really hard because I wanted it to work out for both sides. They're both our clients, equally important to both of us, to all of us. So I start making suggestions to our buyer about just getting the earnest money in, because that's going to it's earnest. It shows that you are in this transaction to win it. They had their inspections. They asked for some repairs. Our sellers willingly did that. They asked for a quick closing. So our sellers moved their entire house to another state in 2 weeks because it was a cash deal. We weren't waiting on a lender to underwrite this mortgage. So everything gets super fast. The earnest money still doesn't turn up, but he's confident that we'll close on time. So we get to the closing day and he can't close because the funds aren't there. And so that's when I start asking questions like, where are they? And he was gracious enough to give us his trust manager's number and name. And then we have to go to the seller and say, okay, we can't close. So that's when Brian steps in and says, okay, we're going to need an extension.
Yeah. Who I don't think we actually ever spoke with on the phone, did we?
Yeah.
Because he was always in the hospital.
Oh, yeah. I think one time.
Yeah.
You got him on the phone one time.
So, we could write a book just on this one transaction and all the different reasons why this buyer couldn't get his money. And it ultimately got to the point you knew almost right away that something maybe fishy was going on.
Yes.
And when we had difficulty verifying getting in touch with the person to say what was actually happening.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking to attorneys from different countries. I'm talking with people from New York, from Florida, Hawaii, all different folks that I have been, just ping-ponged around to try and get some information on what in the world's going on and where this money is so that this seller can close on the house. And ultimately, again, they didn't purchase the property.
Right.
But they again, keyword, extension fees.
Yes.
They didn't close on the property and they didn't get the full amount of extension fees that they wanted. So what happened then? So
the buyer suggested that he would pay $1,000 a day in extension fees. So 1 week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by, and he's paying even Saturday and Sunday $1,000. That was his idea. All I was asking him to do was pay the additional earnest money. So ultimately, he doesn't buy the property, and he owes our seller not only the extension fees, but the additional earnest money, and I think some damages because they had already made repairs and they had to close and go really quickly and rent storage units and such. So I think ultimately, they're in litigation for $128,000, which is astounding.
I mean, it's a lot of money. And that is the reality of real estate contracts. Sometimes these folks feel like they're above the law,
yes,
or that, they're not going to do anything about it. They're not actually going to get an attorney. They might threaten me, but they're not going to go forward with it. And so again, it's you give people an inch, they'll take a mile, and not necessarily give you the same grace in return.
No.
So you can do it on your end if you want to just feel good about it. But I think it's also an opportunity for you to, frankly, make a little money.
Yeah.
Right. Because time is money. And if they're taking time and if that time is costing you money, you certainly shouldn't have to pay for someone else's, complacency or anything else that might cause a delay on their end because it's outside of your control.
Right.
All right. Well, we've got a few more stories. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to finish up with the last few minutes of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here with Lynda Futch, special guest on the Halloween episode. And again, if you want to reach out to us, you have questions about the market, you want to know what your home is worth, you're thinking of buying, selling, investing, or you have a property you want us to manage, feel free to give me a call or text me. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. And we've got a little bit of time left. We've got more stories than we have time for, obviously. But we had a property that we sold somewhat recently. And we were talking earlier about, sometimes properties don't sell for happy reasons, right? And so, and I bring this up because, agents are so competitive about everything, about every stat line, about, how quickly they sell things, for how much money they sell things for. And don't get me wrong, we've got great stats. I mean, when you have 1,500 transactions, about $1 billion worth of real estate sold, the stats are going to look good. But the point that I want to make is that it's all about the client. It's all about their specific need and the game plan you then construct associated with that need to achieve results. So we had a property that we listed that was the result of just someone was getting older. They were not in good health. They needed to go into assisted living. And we were working with the appointee, right, to effectively sell the property. The challenge was the person that we were talking to, the son, right, didn't want it to appear as though he just got this opportunity to take a listing and pocket some money and sell it and, wham, bam, I'm out of here. So we had to intentionally overprice the property to make it look as though we weren't just fire sailing this so that, everybody could take advantage of the opportunity, put some money in their pocket and move on. Now, ultimately, we got that property sold, but there were some interesting things that I think happened in that particular transaction. If you care to shed any light on that.
Oh, sure. So it hadn't been well maintained. So that's another condition. The condition was a problem. And it wasn't a happy situation. Usually you're excited for your sellers. They're on their way to a new adventure and it's exciting. In this instance, we just had to be very careful because there was a lot of emotion involved. And so that's when I think I come in and I'm really the feeler. Brian is so good at the business aspect and seeing big picture, but I come in with kind of a little bit more emotion and a little bit understanding of where they're coming from. And that takes, I think it takes time to learn how to do. And this particular seller was so great, very business oriented, but he did have that need to make sure his father was taken care of. And that's what ultimately we were able to do for the whole family. But that was a difficult one because the buyers were first-time home buyers. They wanted everything under the sun fixed. They didn't want a credit. They wanted it fixed. And normally it's just so much cleaner to give a credit. And they did not want to do that. We were just not in a position that we could get everything fixed. The sellers were out of state. The dad was still in town, but really not in a capacity, capable of making these decisions. So in that instance, I'll go through and I'll get all the facts and figures from a company on what it would take to renovate, and then we can offer a credit to fix.
Right. And that particular buyer's idea of what it was going to cost to fix the house was outlandish in comparison to what it would have actually taken to make those repairs.
Right.
I mean, they were off by I think their quote came in at over $100,000, and the total quote that we got from a contractor we trust. It's not like we found some guy at 7-Eleven and he's going to do all this stuff for us. I mean, they do a bunch of stuff for us, and it came in at like $30,000.
Right.
So that's again, there's a lesson there. Make sure that you work with somebody you trust enough to arm you with the information to defend yourself in negotiations or go on the offensive. But that was an interesting one. But what's really funny is that same buyer that asked for all those things ended up coming back and paying full price for it.
Yep.
As is.
They did.
That was a good one.
They did.
Sometimes we have to be really creative with condition-based stuff because, again, not everybody has the funds available to renovate a property, nor is it always the best idea to actually renovate a property. Sometimes it does make more sense to offer a credit for things like flooring or countertops or, very personalized choices. But we had a property that we were dealing with where it was a nice big home, great space, had some finished space in the garage, but it really was a 3-bedroom house, right? A big 3-bedroom house. And one of the big comments was, we really need like an extra bedroom in the main house. And so this is where I think creativity comes in, and the fact that technology is just so wonderful these days, right? Because we do so much with virtual staging and rendering that I said, hey, look, we've got this 2-story great room off of the kitchen that opens up to the kitchen. We did this in our own house, and we gained 400 square feet for $40,000. I said, why don't we look into putting, a floor here? Let's turn this 2-story family room into a 1-story family room. And then when you get upstairs, you've got plenty of space for an additional bedroom, maybe even 2, and a bathroom. And so what we did is we then said, all right, well, let's get a contractor out here to figure out how much that would cost to do. And then once we get that quote, we can also get a company to do a virtual remodel on that space so that we can have photos we post online, or, canvases that we print off and put on easels right at the top of the stairs to say like, hey, this is what this space could be, and here's how much it would cost. And if we know how much it's going to cost, I think it came in at like $50-ish grand. Yeah. We're talking about a property that is hundreds of dollars per square foot. So, you're going to add 400 square feet for $50,000, and that 400 square feet is going to be worth $125,000. That's a project that makes a lot of sense. Right. The numbers aren't quite accurate there, but you get the point. You're spending money to increase the value of your property.
Right.
There's an actual return on investment there, and that's kind of the creativity that we try and bring to the table, so that we're really thinking outside of the box. And I just want to say that I really appreciate your ability to do that with our clients as well, and for just being so reliable and such a, that mama bear that I think sometimes our clients need, sometimes me too. So thank you so much for that. And it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I think we should have you on again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Our pleasure. So thanks so much for listening to the program. You guys have a great Halloween. And remember, if you want to reach out to me, you want to talk real estate, maybe it's a general knowledge question, maybe you need a contact, or maybe you're thinking of actually hiring a real estate agent to help you at some point in the future. We'd love the opportunity to earn your business. Our number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. Y'all have a great weekend.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.